How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Bitcoin is doing something really interesting. And honestly, I haven't seen too many people talk about it in this way that we're going to approach it here today. I think that this is just the beginning for Bitcoin. If you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notification underneath the video, stay through the end of the video so that you can see everything that I'm about to present. And there's also a link down there to Margex where you can trade cryptocurrency on leverage in case you want to play these swings, in case you want to look at TA. For example, maybe you're looking at this inverse head and shoulders and thinking maybe this is a good time to be buying Bitcoin or going long on Bitcoin for this next big move. You can check out the link underneath the video. With that link, you also get a 20% deposit bonus that can be used towards fees. Now, we've gotten some news over the last 24 hours that MicroStrategy is buying some more Bitcoin. This is not out of the ordinary. This is something a lot of people expected. MicroStrategy had their earnings last night, but now they hold 190,000 Bitcoin. Now, what this made me think of is all the people that are buying Bitcoin. We hear about them all the time, but we kind of just brush it aside like, oh, obviously MicroStrategy is going to buy more Bitcoin. We've heard recently that Tether was going to buy more Bitcoin because they use about 15% of their profits each quarter to buy Bitcoin. There are a handful of other companies that do the same thing. A lot of crypto-based companies will take some of their earnings and then go buy some Bitcoin with it as another kind of reserve asset for their company. And a lot of them are bullish on the sector in general. Now, that got me thinking, this is very similar to something we already see in the financial world. I'll get to that in a second, but we've had certain countries talk about possibly buying Bitcoin, or there being rumors like Qatar's sovereign wealth fund was going to be buying Bitcoin. And then I thought, okay, well, what's their GDP actually like? 180 billion. Okay, that's still very small compared to the US, but you can see UAE, or basically similar to Dubai, the UAE 415 billion, and you can move up to some bigger countries, even bigger than that. I mean, when you look at sovereign wealth funds, these still are small compared to some of the largest sovereign wealth funds. For example, Norway is actually the biggest. The pension fund is actually $1.5 trillion, which is massive. China's 1.35, Safe Investment Company 1.09, which is in Asia. You can go down the line. There are a lot of large sovereign wealth funds and a lot of large pension funds and a lot of money out there. We talk about MicroStrategy buying, and they're a very small player. The market cap is, their holdings of Bitcoin are around 8 billion, and that's pretty much all that they have. Of course, they have the legacy business. We look at Tether as well, and they're kind of a big company, but again, when you look at it compared to some of the largest companies in the world, quite small. That's why I want to look at this, look at some of the largest countries, because what they're doing and what ETFs are going to do, like BlackRock's ETF Fidelity, they're basically going to continue to buy Bitcoin, and dollar cost average is kind of like a stock buyback. And if you don't know what stock buybacks are, basically there are three different ways for companies to use their cash. Maybe they go and continue to try to grow their company, right? Maybe they acquire or they spend more money building out facilities or researching or something. That's one way. They can actually reinvest in themselves. Another way is paying dividends. Then another way is buying their stock. What does that do? Well, it kind of financially engineers them to be able to produce bigger and bigger EPS numbers or revenue per share even numbers, without really having to grow their underlying business. Take a look at Apple. Apple's very known for this. You can see last year they actually had decreasing revenues, and I'll bring this back to Bitcoin in a second. They actually had decreasing revenues. So the amount of money that they're bringing in is less from 2022 to 2023. They had increasing expenses as well. So if you were any right-thinking person, you would think, okay, well, they have decreasing revenue. They have increasing expenses. They're probably going to make less profit overall, but that's not the case. They actually had higher earnings per share, even though it was very small. They had higher earnings per share, even though they made less and spent more. Now, how did they do this? Well, they bought back their own shares. You can see here, they decreased their amount of shares outstanding by about 3%. They've done this for years. They actually have about half, maybe about 60% of the shares that they had at one point back in 2012. a lot of other companies do this too. A lot of the big companies that you would think of, Microsoft, Facebook, I even saw Google do this last quarter. They spend a lot of their earnings, a lot of their cash flow, a lot of their cash buying back shares. Now, the interesting part about companies doing this is that when the stock price goes down, they're able to buy their stock at a cheaper and cheaper rate. So if, for example, it sells off because of some sort of FUD or because of, I don't know, some bad results, well, if they still have significant cash flows, if their business isn't really, if it's not hurt for the long term, they can just go buy back shares at a cheaper rate. And if they rebound back to the same spot they were at before, well, they were just able to buy shares at a much cheaper rate. And now their company's stronger than ever. They can give more earnings per share because they bought back those shares. And I kind of thought this is sort of similar to how some companies are approaching Bitcoin. This artificially holds up the price as well because people realize that, okay, well, Apple has $61 billion worth of cash to buy back shares. Of course, they have some debt, but they will buy back more shares if the price goes down further. So it kind of holds the price up pretty well. A lot of these stocks don't fall down as much as some kind of growth company because the largest buyer of the stock is oftentimes the company itself. Now, Bitcoin can't buy back its own Bitcoin or anything like that. But when you look at how it works, there are many companies that just dollar cost average into Bitcoin. As it falls further and further, they're willing to buy more and more. There are entities too that are buying behind the scenes that we don't know about. I guarantee you there are companies much bigger than MicroStrategy, bigger than Tether that are buying Bitcoin. And there are also countries that are buying Bitcoin that we don't know about. If Bitcoin's price falls down and UAE has been talking about buying Bitcoin or Qatar has been talking about buying Bitcoin, if Russia has been talking about buying Bitcoin, they will buy and that will artificially prop up the price. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we're never going to go down. It's not like Apple exactly where there's this kind of liquidity, this kind of leverage. There's much more of a chance that we fall down quickly on Bitcoin than any of the major tech stocks out there, in my opinion. But we also can see certain companies, certain countries buying pretty heavily if the price falls down. And I think that's something that's bound to happen more in the future. If we fall down from 43,000 to 35,000, yeah, you're going to hear a lot of FUD. Honestly, a lot of people will become bearish. But a lot of large entities are probably going to be pushing that FUD so that you don't buy and they do. So they get lower prices. So I think this is actually quite interesting, a quite different way to think about it than just like, oh, sometimes people want to buy, some people don't want to buy. No, there are companies and countries that are dollar cost averaging, propping up the price, and they're going to swallow up any kind of dip possible. They have billions, tens of billions, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars to put into Bitcoin and they're waiting, or they're dollar cost averaging, but they want larger amounts. And they'll continue to buy as time goes on. How do you think we're absorbing all this selling pressure from GBTC? Well, there are an equal number of people buying. I mean, 641 million in a day, 500 million in a day, 429 million in a day. There are people buying about equal amounts of this. Of course, we have seen the price go down a little bit since these were approved, but since like the second day after this was approved, or the first day even, we're pretty much sideways. We've just been absorbing all the selling pressure. Now, there is some news that there might be some more GBTC selling soon. I've talked about that in a recent video, but you can see that so far the selling is actually getting less and less each day. 108 million, 73 million. It's kind of drying up. Now, again, we might have that big push because of some companies that are liquidating GBTC, but that might never come, and that might come a long time down the line either. Also, so we might not see the effects of that for a while. I want to hear your thoughts on this kind of theory, this kind of Bitcoin buyback theory. I think it's something that's obviously going on, but just something that I hadn't really wrapped my head around as much until today, I think. Keep in mind, too, we only have about 63,000 Bitcoin until the Bitcoin halving, and then there's going to be less Bitcoin coming to the markets. We also have banks that are collapsing. I covered this yesterday, but New York Community Bank Corp was down 22% yesterday and down about 60% this month. Some people think that this is going to continue to happen. Arthur Hayes talks about how Bitcoin at $1 million is still on the table. And in this article, they kind of go through what's happening with New York City Bank, and it's just not a good situation. Really, the banks aren't safe. About 40% of the deposits at at this New York Community Bank aren't insured by FDIC because they're above that $250,000 limit, which could cause a bank run. Let me know your thoughts on that underneath the video as well. And just a little fun fact. I was watching Big Bang Theory. I've been watching this with my wife, and we just watched the episode where they found out or remembered that they had been mining Bitcoin. And obviously this is a sitcom. It's not necessarily true, but I think this happened to a lot of people. Basically, they found out that they maybe bought some Bitcoin or mined some Bitcoin. And the whole episode is them trying to go back through and figure out where this Bitcoin is. Like they moved it from one laptop to another because the other laptop kept on crashing. And then they had gotten rid of the laptop and then they had to go get it. And then someone took it and then put it on a flash drive. That's how they call it, a flash drive in the show, but basically cold storage. And then they accidentally lost it. Like this happened a lot with a lot of Bitcoin. A lot of Bitcoin was lost, but it was just interesting to see this show kind of portray something that happened to a lot of people. Let me know your thoughts on all this underneath the video. Again, you can check out the link to Margex in case you want to get situated for this next massive move. Either way, I suppose, but definitely check this link out underneath the video. There's also a link down there to HGAaccess as well in case you want to get in a Patreon with myself and about 9 other influencers where we can talk about anything essentially that you want. You can ask us some questions when we do live streams. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will see you in the next video.